Two doctors are flying over the Congo River, but they're not here to treat patients. Olaf Valverde is from Spain and Bernard Pécoul from France. Bernard is the director of DNDI, Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative. Neglected diseases and poor patients are of little interest to governments and the pharmaceutical industry, ironically referred to as Big Pharma. There's no investment, no research, and no new drugs. So DNDI, or Little Pharma, is doing what Big Pharma stopped doing, producing drugs for those forgotten by medical research. Here in Congo-Kinshasa, the disease abandoned by science is sleeping sickness. The tsetse fly bites and transmits the parasite which attacks the victim's central nervous system. The patient suffers from fever and neurological troubles, sliding gradually into insanity, coma, and then death. Already in the 1920s, the remedy used was Arsabal or Melarsoprol, a toxic, painful, and arsenic-based cure. One patient in 20 did not survive the treatment. A decade of effort was needed before scientists and doctors such as Bernard Pécoul were to develop a second-generation treatment to replace the notorious Arsabal. Jeremy, a teacher, has contracted sleeping sickness several times. He well remembers the derivative of arsenic.
I'm a teacher, but I also fish. And where I go fishing, it's really not healthy. There are biting tsetse flies absolutely everywhere. I lost weight, felt sleepy, and I also talked a lot. It was like the beginning of madness. The mobile team was passing through, and I was diagnosed with sleeping sickness. I was treated here. I was treated with the cure called Arsabal. The treatment was painful. It was intravenous and really hurt. I'd feel so hot, like I was on fire. When we were injected with Arsabal, we had to open our mouths wide. We felt so hot.
Bernard and Olaf have come to observe the clinical trials for a new drug. The visit will be for tomorrow, but this evening, Bernard is meeting a retired nurse.
So you went to nursing school?
Yes, I went in 1943.
In the immensity of the Congo, when two healthcare workers meet, the conversation inevitably drifts towards sleeping sickness.
You must have known that Arsabal and Melarsoprol were toxic.
Yes, they're toxic.
I believe that some patients here have died because of Arsabal.
Yes, absolutely.
So we started by looking to replace Arsabal with another treatment. We did this by combining two drugs, eflornithine and nifurtimox, one which is injectable and the other which is in tablet form. And today, most of the treatment centers in the Congo are using this treatment, called NECT.
For Bernard, this NECT, which has driven arsenic from the pharmacist's shelves, is more than just a combination of two drugs. It is a symbol of 20 years of struggle.
Because NECT made me sweat a lot. It was NECT that made my hair go grey. When we started, I had dark hair.
So it took its toll.
I'll tell you the whole story. It's a long story.
The long story of NECT parallels that of the doctor himself. He joined MSF in the 1980s on missions to Central America, Africa, and Asia. As an epidemiologist, he gradually found himself confronted by a lack of new drugs. In the 90s, Bernard then took the lead of a pressure group created by MSF with the aim of shaking up Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical industry. Giving a boost to the production of new drugs had become vital. Seattle, 1999, WTO, the World Trade Organization, was holding its annual meeting. Numerous NGOs, such as MSF, had been invited to give their opinions on the state of the world and the world's trade. The anti-globalization movement did not wait for an invitation. The meeting turned into a gigantic demonstration. What Bernard then said to the representatives of the WTO was considered to be a landmark.
Why are we, a medical humanitarian agency, here in Seattle at the start of the ministerial meeting on trade? Because our patients are dying. Our patients are dying, not because their diseases are incurable, but because as consumers, they do not provide a viable market for pharmaceutical products. After all, products don't have rights, people do. Your political leadership is vital to their survival. Thank you.
At the time, the position of the representative of the pharmaceutical industry, Harvey Bale, was clear and unambiguous. Stop your criticisms. We're investing massively in research and we're the only ones capable of manufacturing drugs.
And research is the primary function of this industry. These drugs are not going to come from governments. They're not going to come from MSF. They're not going to come from Oxfam. They're going to come from a commercial company.
But as they say, how wrong can you be? Just a few years later, NECT was not invented by a multinational, but by scientists totally unschooled in the rules of big business. It was the turning point. Big Pharma had just given birth to Little Pharma.
At the end of the 90s, we realized that for these neglected diseases, there was very little chance of seeing the pharmaceutical industry carry out research off its own bat, because these diseases did not represent a sufficiently attractive market for them. We believed that alternative research institutions could be created in the form of product development partnerships. These product development partnerships, or PDPs, are associations which bring together universities, representatives of the pharmaceutical industry, representatives of the associations fighting these diseases, representatives of the drug prescribers, and so on, in order to carry out research projects on a not-for-profit basis, so that new drugs can be created for these diseases, which need them so badly.
DNDi is one of these PDPs.
Our overall condition appears to be unchanged.
In the wake of the significant breakthrough achieved with NECT, Bernard and Olaf are looking further afield. Fexinidazole is a third-generation drug being tested here on patients. They have come to watch the Congolese medical team, which is comparing its safety and effectiveness with that of NECT, which has already proven itself.
This is the small box in which the study drugs are kept. The secret hiding place. So this is the fexinidazole. The box contains the entire treatment, which lasts 10 days. In this test, we're comparing two treatments. There's the standard treatment, which is NECT, the normal treatment, which is used in all the programs. And then there's the fexinidazole, which is a new treatment. NECT is a treatment which combines tablets and injection, whereas fexinidazole is an exclusively oral treatment.
Switching from injections to tablets is every doctor's dream. Getting the treatment to patients who live in remote places is anything but simple. NECT means 10 kilos of small bottles to treat one patient. Fexinidazole represents just a few grams.
For this disease, we wanted a simple treatment, to be administered orally, if possible for a short period of time, and not requiring any sophisticated additional examinations, so that it can be used in the villages once patients have been diagnosed. We must also bear in mind that, economically speaking, the patients we are trying to reach live in difficult circumstances, so we have to consider the price of the treatment. And this is what guides our strategy far more than sales figures, because we are a completely non-profit organization.
The time when Big Pharma and Little Pharma were at daggers drawn is now past, and today they are cooperating. DNDi will always need the skills that are available within the industry.
When we were discussing access issues, we absolutely needed to talk to the pharmaceutical industry. So we've always been focused, admittedly sometimes with a bit of brute force, on the goal of finding concrete solutions, because what we were interested in was to improve the situation of the patients, and industry has a key role to play in that. So I can't claim today that we have completely turned things round. It's not been a revolution, it's more of an evolution. The industry's managers now want to collaborate. Their perception and awareness has clearly changed.
Drugs for Neglected Diseases initiative. Well, they weren't the pharmaceutical industry's best friends, but they did stir things up, and their criticisms motivated us to work with them.
Yesterday's enemy has become today's partner. Sanofi is DNDi's industrial partner. The third scientific partner is the Swiss Tropical and Public Health Institute. The money comes from public donors in Germany, France, United Kingdom, Switzerland, Holland, Spain, and so on, as well as private ones, including a medical NGO and an American foundation. They all came together to produce fexinidazole.
If the international health authorities, and in particular the Drugs Registration Agency, because you have to be registered, understand that here we're dealing with a fatal disease that is affecting extremely poor populations, and are not too particular when it comes to details in the files, the clinical studies, if they recognize that there's a real need concerning this disease, then we're talking of 2 to 3 years. So you see that we're perhaps very close to eliminating or massively reducing this disease by the year 2020.
The American foundation providing the funding is the Bill Gates Foundation. In Seattle, in the northwest United States, it rains nearly all the time. Another deluge, dollars this time, is raining down on the world of healthcare. Bill Gates, the former computer guru, set up his foundation in 2000 with the motto, "We believe every person deserves the chance to live a healthy, productive life." He spared no expense in following the economic strategy of a multinational. His ambitions were as great as the challenges he faced, for example, eradicating polio or finding a vaccine against malaria. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation partly finances the World Health Organization, biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies, and PDPs. Whenever a group of pharmaceutical companies organizes a conference on innovation, the Gates Foundation is always invited to attend. DNDi is also on the guest list. Bernard Pécoul finds himself at the same round table as Trevor Mundell, Mr. Health in the Gates Foundation.
The fact that you live with 2 conditions, which has 2 separate sort of
We believe that every person on the planet deserves a right to a healthy, productive life. And we understand that in the poorest of countries, it is they call them neglected diseases, but in some ways diseases of neglected communities that are impacting and preventing people from achieving that aim.
the limited resources that we have to bring people.
A number of the PDPs, although we may be one contributor to them, have got fairly diverse set of funding. So Drugs for Neglected Disease Initiative is funded by diverse sources, European community, particular countries, private investors. So I think there is some truth that we are a big funder of the PDPs because we believe in that model of moving forward with these partners and collaborators.
Our innovation.
Basically, the priorities of the Gates Foundation are not too different from those of governments. They are therefore not able to redress an imbalance which already exists, and which means that priority is given to certain types of action over treatment, in particular vaccination. Because, as the old saying goes, prevention is better than cure. They believe that investing in prevention, in vaccination, will be more effective in public health terms. When this is actually possible, for example, the eradication of smallpox, it's absolutely wonderful. But it's not always possible. And until such time as these diseases are brought under control, eliminated or even eradicated, well, there are large numbers of patients and we need new drugs to be able to treat them.
But one thorny question won't go away. The Gates Foundation is wealthier than the WHO. With such power placed in the hands of a single individual, however generous, is there not a risk of privatizing world health?
Yes, this is obviously a controversial question. So, first of all, let me say that there is no doubt that the philanthropic commitment on the part of Bill Gates, his wife, and Buffett has changed the face of drug, vaccine, etc. development for the neglected diseases. Without this financial input, we'd not have made all this progress. So that's the reality. Might there be other ways of going about things? No doubt. On the other hand, you have to respect the wishes of these private players who want to invest in the things in which they believe. They could believe in investing in art, in contemporary art or vintage cars. They'd be perfectly entitled to. They choose to invest in health for neglected populations. So I say, congratulations. They have their preferences. They generally invest in what is commonly referred to as commodities. These commodities are vaccines, drugs, diagnostics, etc. Rather than the development of healthcare systems, they're focusing on the development of certain tools, and they have a particular preference for vaccines.
At the Gates Foundation, this pronounced preference for vaccines was to take the shape of a three-way alliance: Gates, the WHO, and a PDP. The trio decided to concentrate on a disease which rampages through Africa in wave after wave of epidemic, the fatal meningitis A, which in particular kills children. From Senegal in the west to Ethiopia in the east, sub-Saharan Africa is regularly struck by epidemics. That of 1996-1997, which was the most extensive ever observed, led to 25,000 victims worldwide.
Meningitis is a disease which mainly attacks children, although it does also affect adults. The disease is contracted during the dry season when it's very hot. It paralyzes children. They lose the use of their legs. It can make them deaf and even deaf and dumb. Some are left mentally handicapped. In fact, many of them.
Path is the third member of the trio and the inventor of a new vaccine. Like the Gates Foundation, Path is established in Seattle and is probably the world's first PDP. This North American organization was founded in the 1970s and at the time concentrated on contraception.
PATH has been in existence for over 35 years now, and it started with three gentlemen, Gordon Perkin, Gordon Duncan, and Rich Mahoney, who had worked together over the years on reproductive health and contraceptive development and introduction. Two of them had worked with the Ford Foundation, both in New York as well as in Latin America, and they had a passion for getting new, safe, and effective contraceptives out to the people who needed them.
In the 80s and 90s, PATH became a master of the art of getting the private and public sectors to work together. In 2000, the WHO planned the development of a new vaccine against meningitis. In 2001, the Gates Foundation donated 50 million euros and PATH got to work.
It began with the need. There were periodic epidemics that swept across the meningitis belt in Africa, from Senegal in the west to Ethiopia in the east, killing 10% of those who were infected and causing a lot of other health issues in people who survived. WHO came to PATH and said, there's demand for this vaccine. We need this vaccine, but it has to be affordable. And 50 cents a dose is about the maximum that we can afford in order to make this available to these poorest of poorest populations. PATH then identified an Indian manufacturer, Serum Institute, and worked with them to understand what was needed to develop the vaccine, to help them through the clinical process and development process, to work with them and WHO on clinical trials, and able to move that product forward.
The operational side was being run by PATH. However, for definition of the characteristics of the product, the WHO consulted the populations and the health ministries of the countries which needed this drug. And when the question was to develop the best way of introducing the vaccine into Africa, once again, the WHO was in charge.
The miracle vaccine was ready in 2009 and was called Menafrivac. It can withstand temperatures of 40 degrees Celsius for 4 days. Development was to cost less than 50 million euros. One dose costs 40 euro cents. The first major vaccination campaigns got underway. Burkina Faso, Senegal, Niger, Mali, Chad, Cameroon, and so on.
In the traditional industry, costs of several hundred million are mentioned for a new treatment, whereas in the field which concerns us here, we have managed to keep costs down to several tens of millions per new treatment. So we can see that there is a relatively large factor of 10. How? Why? Firstly, because this research is more cooperative than competitive between institutions, and secondly, we get straight to the nub of the matter. We don't make a copy of an existing product simply so that we can try and sell it on a market. And we save our research effort for what will be real medical and public health innovations.
We heard they were vaccinating on TV and on the radio. They said we would be protected for 10 years.
We won't be seeing large-scale interventions for this disease anymore. Interventions such as those in Niger or in Nigeria and a certain number of other countries in the belt, with thousands or even millions of people vaccinated against the disease.
The milestone of 100 million vaccinated patients was reached in late 2012. Once 350 million people have been vaccinated, meningitis will be under control in Africa.
For the traditional industry in the period 2000 to 2011, some 700 products were placed on the market, only about 4% of which feature on the WHO's list of essential drugs. For the extremely small sector which concerns us, during the same period, 2000-2011, 37 new products were registered, 50% of which were directly included on the WHO's list of essential drugs. So we have the clear impression that by comparison, one activity is far more useful to public health than the other.
You know,
there's lots of folks facing an enemy right here at home. An enemy they can't handle like our boys in uniform handle the Nazis and the Japs. It threatens us everywhere and always with a sneak attack. By this time you must have received this letter containing your Tuberculosis Association Christmas seals. It's your chance to help in this fight, because by buying these seals, you're helping in the war against this disease, just as you're buying bonds or helping win our global war. You got this letter, so don't forget to answer it, huh?
Bing Crosby could not have imagined that this white plague, tuberculosis, would be almost wiped out by the power of antibiotics. Even if we no longer live in fear of the kiss of death, which transmits the Cox bacillus, tuberculosis is nonetheless digging in its heels. The arsenal of anti-tubercular weapons has been the same for decades, and the bacillus has been able to create defenses through what doctors call resistant forms of the disease, forms of tuberculosis that are immune to the basic antibiotics.
What hurts is the word tuberculosis. I'm not suffering internally or physically, but I know what the word tuberculosis means because I learned it at school. I didn't believe that I would actually see it one day, here and now. I thought that it was a thing of the past. Just get a vaccine and it's over.
So it's compulsory to wear a mask, as you can see on the door here. It says an orange mask for this patient. Some of the drugs, like rifampicin, even have visible effects. If this man cries, for example, his tears will be orange. His urine will be orange too.
Rifampicin, the basic antibiotic, is to tuberculosis what aspirin is to migraine. Methods of diagnosis, however, date back to the 19th century.
To diagnose tuberculosis, we use tools that date back to our grandparents. In other words, we take sputum from the patients and look at it under a microscope to check whether or not bacilli are present on the slide.
The reagents needed to demonstrate tubercle bacilli in sputum are carbofuchsin, acid alcohol, and alkaline methylene blue. We need also an alcohol lamp, a platinum loop, and a glass slide. With methylene blue.
March 23rd,
A
2007.
PDP, in association with the molecular biology company Cepheid, was finally to bring the techniques of yesteryear into the modern era. The Swiss PDP is called FIND, a specialist in diagnostic tools. Its ally, Cepheid, designed a robot tester which analyzes the very heart of living matter, Gene Expert.
Riley, no! Amateur Gene Expert Systems. Now that's an expert.
Oh, no.
This revolution fits into a plastic cartridge and its compact workstation. The history of the association between these two partners is also something of a surprise.
Cepheid
Cepheid is a molecular biology company and develops tests. For the time being, 14 different tests.
FIND is what we call a PDP, and its goal, together with its partners, is to develop new diagnostic tests for infectious diseases. And in particular, we're working on tuberculosis and neglected tropical diseases.
The story is indeed an incredible one, because the alliance between the two partners came about because of the war on terror. In 2001, just after the attack on the World Trade Center, the United States experienced a second wave of terrorist panic. Letters poisoned with anthrax were sent to journalists and senators. 22 people were contaminated and 5 died.
The American government, the postal services, contacted a major military company, Northrop Grumman, so that each letter could be examined for any white powder, for anthrax. So we developed tests for anthrax and others to protect against biological threats. FIND had read about this somewhere, got in touch with us and said, right, you can make a tuberculosis test for us.
We would have found the American biotech company with or without bioterrorism. But without this bioterrorism, I don't know whether this company would have developed GeneXpert just at the time we were looking for a technology which seemed most promising for the future.
It's very, very simple. You put the sample here in the special chamber. You scan the cartridge so the machine knows which test to run. You place it in the machine. And less than 2 hours later, the machine comes up with the result and tells you whether or not tuberculosis is present, and what's more, whether or not it's resistant to rifampicin.
At last, a quick and easy tool for detecting tuberculosis, and one that's capable of immediately telling whether the tuberculosis is resistant so that a different treatment can be prescribed. This is vital when one considers that tuberculosis kills nearly 1.5 million people every year around the world, in the former Soviet republics, in Africa, in Asia, and so on. Cambodia is one of the countries most severely affected. The treatment is long and difficult to bear. Patients are rarely detected early enough before they can contaminate those around them. There is thus an endless and vicious circle of transmission.
I would say it's necessary to have rapid diagnosis for 2 reasons. One is the person's own health, and the second is the public health aspect. Diagnosis should be made as quickly as possible to get the patient on treatment as quickly as possible, and then to relieve their suffering. That's the number one thing. But then, as is the case of TB, which is probably unique, it's so contagious, and the more quickly you get the first case on treatment, the less chance there is of spreading that first case's disease to the next case, and the next case, and the next case. So in order to alleviate also the public health aspect of the spread of disease with TB, you need to quickly make the diagnosis of the first patient.
Antonio is a colleague of Manisha. He is an MSF biologist who recently started working with GeneXpert.
The process we used was discovered by Koch, who identified the microbacterium in the late 19th century. Since then, we've been using the same microscope technique. We gradually find out whether or not the bacterium is present in the sputum. To obtain this information, we need at least 3 weeks. And here, in the MSF project in Cambodia, it takes 2 months. The latest development in molecular biology, called GeneXpert, recently came onto the market. It tells you whether the bacterium is present and whether it's resistant to rifampicin. With this molecular biology technique, we can get the results in just 2 hours.
To me, the introduction of new NICE tool, namely the GeneXpert, is a very good and new development for the TB program, not only in Cambodia but worldwide.
I feel that today it would be more accurate to talk of neglected patients rather than neglected diseases. The concept of the neglected disease is true for certain very particular and on the whole very rare tropical diseases. But it would be better to talk of neglected patients. We are moving towards a world, partly thanks to epidemiological transition, where virtually all the planet's inhabitants will have the same diseases. However, they do not live in the same conditions, and when someone is seeking health care in those places where resources are limited, one needs different products and different protocols from those used when receiving care in New York, Tokyo, or Berlin.
Or in Cochabamba, Bolivia. Chagas disease is a cousin of sleeping sickness. Both are parasite-borne diseases called trypanosomiasis, one African, the other American. University professor Faustino Torrico is one of the world's leading specialists in this disease.
Chagas disease affects the Latin American poor. Transmission is most commonly from the excrement of a small arthropod, an insect, which we call the vinchuca.
Several million South Americans are infected by the bug parasite. A bug which goes by a variety of exotic names: vinchuca, chipo, chirimacha, pito, chinchi, chicha. To fight the disease, we must fight the insect.
Do you recognize this?
Yes, I recognize it.
Ever seen one before?
Yes, I've seen them at home.
You must warn the health authorities. Here, look.
Right, a whole colony.
Te deja el Chagas y a veces démosle la lucha. Hombres y mujeres, fumigar paredes, más en los rincones también las habitaciones.
It's a disease which can remain dormant within the body for many years, but when the adult reaches the age of 30 or 40, he or she starts to suffer from heart or digestive diseases.
You know you carry the Chagas parasite in your body. What we're looking at now is your heart, whether it's been affected by the parasite. So you have the parasite, but it hasn't yet caused any damage. That's what's important.
Oh, that's good news.
So I'm feeling reassured?
Oh, yes.
Here, we have been using 2 drugs since the 70s. In Latin America, there are currently between 8 and 12 million infected people waiting for science to come up with a new and safer drug that is more effective and offers better treatment.
A new drug should be replacing the ancient molecules which have become increasingly ineffective. It's known by its code name, E1224. As with sleeping sickness, it's an initiative of DNDi, in particular its South American branch, established in Rio de Janeiro.
For the E1224 project, we have a Japanese partner in the form of a traditional private pharmaceutical company which provides us with the molecule, and then we have a whole host of more operational players in the field in Bolivia. There's Professor Faustino Torrico's group, which gives us access to the patients, and this means that they can be asked to join the clinical trials. We have considerable technical support in Spain, in the USA, Brazil, and Argentina for the whole laboratory side. So we've private, pharmaceutical, conventional stakeholders, and we have universities, academic centers, NGOs working with us. And they're all working together in a partnership on a specific project for a specific period of time.
We supported the project. We looked at the data, at the work already accomplished. We believe that this work on E1224 is very important.
Here are the kits. You can't see much. It's secret. Seriously, it's anonymous. Really. So here, we have all the drugs that the patient will have to take.
The first patients who agreed to take part in the trial were included in 2011.
I want to live a little longer. I know that it's a very serious disease, but I have young children. I'd like to see them grow up. But it's not only about me. There are so many sick people in so many provinces. It's for everyone. Yes.
Doctors are trained to care for and heal patients, and when there is no satisfactory treatment, a new one must be found. It's the duty of any doctor caring for people afflicted by this illness.
Concerning E1224, without Professor Torrico's team, nothing would have been possible. For all the PDPs, DNDi, and the others, the public health services are crucial for innovation. Although thousands of kilometers away from the Vinchuca, Spain also made a contribution. Catalan scientists began to examine this disease about 10 years ago. For them, Chagas was a remote tropical disease, and they did not for a minute imagine that it could threaten their own country.
We began to look at Chagas disease in 2002-2003. We had a patient here in Barcelona with Chagas disease. We then wondered if this was a one-off, an orphan disease or a rare disease, or whether we were faced with a more serious public health problem in our country. Because in recent years, Spain and Barcelona in particular has become home to many migrants from Latin America. We estimate that we have between 50 and 70,000 patients affected by Chagas disease. Patients who could transmit it from mother to child during pregnancy or birth, or from blood transfusions and organ transplants. Urgent solutions were therefore needed if we were not to have health problems here at home.
When I was small, I used to play a lot with this bug, the Vinchuca. I think that I might have the disease.
Most of these migrants, 80 to 90% of them, are from Bolivia. We thought about it and we said, it's all very well trying to resolve this problem in Barcelona, but maybe it would be worth collaborating with our Bolivian colleagues. And that's how we initiated the Barcelona Cochabamba collaboration platform. In concrete terms, we're collaborating with DNDi on the project for a new drug, which for the time being is called E1224. We will find out whether or not this drug works on our patients affected by Chagas disease, adult patients affected by a chronic form.
Scientific research in our field borrows extensively from the public research institutions. If we look at the example of the development of a test for HIV viral load, we can see that it's a public laboratory at Cambridge University which has done the lion's share of the work.
The British Samba machine for testing the HIV viral load is, like GeneXpert, a sort of robot for testing living matter. Samba was designed in Cambridge in partnership with MSF. The organization was looking for a quick and easy tool for detecting the virus in patients for its AIDS programs in Africa. Danielle is a Ugandan lab technician here on training. Helen Lee is a doctor, a professor of biology, and a British citizen of Taiwanese origin. Before showing us Samba, Helen wanted to present a machine which worked on the same principle, but which was much bigger, installed in the hospital a stone's throw from the laboratory.
This machine extracts the nucleic acid from the HIV virus from a tube of blood and plasma. In fact, in the sample you have a lot of cells and a lot of proteins. So it's a bit like looking for a needle in a haystack, as we say in English.
A needle in the haystack. On cherche un aiguille dans une botte de foin.
Right.
Helen, is that machine there Samba?
No, fortunately it's not Samba.
This monster occupying the whole room is not Samba. Samba is the miniature field transportable version, the thing that looks like a microwave oven on the table behind Helen and Danielle.
The name really came from the engineer who developed it, who simply liked dancing. So he called it Samba. But then we had to force fit the name to call it simple amplification-based assay. But really, the truth is it's just a Samba. See, this one drop will never do. See? Yeah. If you look at United Kingdom, in the whole decade, there was about 980 cases of infant getting HIV. But in the developing world, in 2011, 370,000 cases of infants were infected by HIV. And they need timely diagnosis, immediate treatment. And this is what Samba is trying to do. So you're going to try to stop. You have 3 cartridges, 1, 2, and 3. Everything you need are already here. So the idea of Samba is really to simplify a very complex technology such that it can be carried out in peripheral settings without the requirement of air conditioning, of highly trained personnel. But more importantly, it allows access of diagnostics to the patient because you can test and treat while the patients are still on site.
This output tube, wet cartridge, blood samples, dry cartridge, and elution cartridge.
You will find many of the people in my group now can go to industry immediately and make a lot more money, but they will not do that because they really want to see the product developed, used, and that in many ways is our greatest reward.
The comb, we call it. Yeah. The comb.
Samba can also detect other pathologies. Although designed for poor countries, it could easily be adopted by the richer ones.
When you make a test simple, it can be applied anywhere. What works in Malawi for sure will work in the United States. And these days there is a lot of tendency to popularize the testing, for instance, in the drugstores. And so a Samba test for flu, for example, can be perfectly used there.
It's clear that by comparison with a few years ago, the situation has changed radically. There are new players, and in terms of financing, there are philanthropists and there's a wider range of parties really innovating through their research and through their work.
Vraiment en charge de l'innovation par leur recherche et par leurs travaux.
Nous-mêmes, nous étions convaincus qu'il n'y avait que les grandes entreprises pharmaceutiques.
Even we were convinced that only the large pharmaceutical companies were capable of successfully seeing through these research projects. What really changed everything for us in the past 10 years was our experience with these product development partnerships, where we realized that with another kind of financing, separating the financing of product research from the sale of drugs, we were able to carry out successful research in a far shorter period of time, at far more reasonable cost, while producing extremely useful products, as witnessed by their immediate registration on the WHO list of essential drugs. This is the real innovation, which will without doubt lead to questions concerning the organization and the know-how of traditional research.
Sur ces modes d'organisation et ces savoir-faire.